Good evening and welcome. I'm Jeff Cox, the Associate Vice Chancellor for Faculty Affairs and the person tasked by the Provost with managing the process that we've come to know as information, communication, journalism, media, and technology. Before we get started, I need to let you all know that this session is being taped. We tape all of our open meetings, public meetings, in order to provide these tapes to people who can't be here. And I can't forget whether we put them up on our site or whether they're just available.
They're available in my office.
In your office. Okay, thank you. In Carol Capsalis' office. We're not clever enough to...
we did put the last one.
We're not clever enough. Carol's clever enough. I'm not. We have with us today the steering committee that is the faculty committee driving this process. The chair of that committee is Andrew Calabrese from Journalism and Mass Communication. He's joined by Tim Brown from Electrical, Energy, and Computer Engineering and the Interdisciplinary Telecommunications Program, Catherine Eggert from English, Laisha Palin from Computer Science, and Michael Theodore from the College of Music and Atlas. We appreciate all of you being here, and we're looking forward to hearing what you have to say. This is another in the continuing sessions that we've held over the last year and a half and more to allow the entire CU community and beyond that the larger public that the university serves have an opportunity to comment as we move to do what I think we're going to do, though no decisions have been made, which is to create a new college in the area of ICJMT. A quick recap, if you didn't bring your timeline. More than 18 months ago, the Chancellor opened a process of program discontinuance involving the School of Journalism and Mass Communication. At the same time, he asked the Provost to create an exploratory committee to look at new ways in which we could provide education and other academic opportunities in the area we now call ICJMT. Almost a year ago, the Board of Regents voted to discontinue the School of Journalism and Mass Communication, but as you know, that did not mean the end of education or research in journalism and mass communication, as the faculty, the programs, and the students were moved under the leadership of the graduate school, and a new director, Christopher Brader, was appointed to manage the program. So we've had a lot of focus on that process. The good news is that journalism and mass communication are alive and well on campus. The faculty and students are pursuing their usual interests. They're doing a great job. The interest of our students continues to be high. This spring we began offering the Journalism Plus program where undergraduates in journalism pursue both their degree in journalism or mass communication and a second area of study, largely offered through the College of Arts and Sciences. And as we look to next fall, our applications and so on seem to be running strong. So we're very happy about all that. Now, I said it's at the same time, a year ago, last August, an exploratory committee was put together to work on a visioning process, as we say in administration. And that committee reported out to the provost and the campus about a year ago. The provost received that report, and on the basis of that report, he decided to move forward with a second stage in the kind of visioning and planning process. And that's really what we're in the middle of now, and what we're here to listen to you about, but also to tell you where we are. So as I think you all know, the first phase of this was the creation of 8 discussion groups that were convened by faculty from across the university. Almost all of the, well, I guess all but 2 of the schools and colleges had conveners involved in this process. Just to quickly remind you of what these discussion groups were, there was one that was looking at the the kind of delivery of factual information to a wider public across a variety of platforms and media that included journalism, documentary filmmaking, creative nonfiction, and so on. There was another group that was looking at media studies, communication, mass communications, the disciplines that study communication, mass communication, media. There was a group talking about advertising and design, a group on the role of technology and computation in this area we're discussing, a group thinking about journalism's relationship between science and particularly in relationship to the environment, given our center in environmental journalism, a group on arts and how the arts use new technology, new media in the production of art, a group on technology and the digital humanities, and a group that was thinking about all of these issues in relation to internationalization and globalization, two key issues that face us kind of in all of our disciplinary areas, but are in particular are connected with the world of technology, communication, and so on. So these groups met, in some cases starting last summer. They met throughout the fall. They held open meetings. They convened amongst themselves. They, when appropriate, met with outside constituencies. I got to attend, for example, a wonderful meeting with local documentary filmmakers. I had no idea what a hotbed of documentary filmmaking the Boulder, Denver area is, with Academy Award and Emmy Award winning documentary filmmakers who are incredibly excited about opportunities of collaborating with the campus, something I don't think we've taken enough advantage of. Another group met with local entrepreneurs, particularly working in social media areas, but other high-tech areas. So efforts to reach beyond the campus as well. So they did their work in a kind of ground-up, faculty-driven process. They reported out their ideas to the steering committee at the end of the fall semester. Their basic charge was to come up with as many exciting educational and academic ideas within their purview, or beyond their purview for that matter, as they could. They weren't charged with coming up with administrative structures. They weren't charged with coming up with lists of courses. They were charged to think broadly and inventively. And I think they came up with some incredibly exciting ideas. Last week, the steering committee convened the discussion groups to, they had all seen each other's work by this point, but to have an oral exchange about what they thought their key findings were and to talk about commonalities. And I think it was an extremely productive conversation. So why are we here today? We're largely here to make sure that we hear from you about any ideas or concerns that may not have entered into the process yet. Well, you know, we have kept this process as open and as fluid as possible. As we all know, despite the fact we're talking about communication, communication doesn't always work. People don't hear about things. People are busy. So here's another opportunity to provide us with ideas or, as I say, concerns you may have. And that's the primary purpose, but I imagine you also came here thinking you would hear where we're headed. I think it's important for you to know that we don't know in any definitive way where we're headed. The kind of discussion group process has kind of just come to its culmination within the last week. The steering committee has until the Friday before spring break, what is it, March 23rd? March 23rd is its reporting date to the provost, when it will submit its recommendations for how we should move forward. And if you're wondering, so why has this report different from the exploratory report last year? The exploratory committee was asked to provide a very broad vision of kind of the intellectual issues that we would want to address. It had some practical recommendations as well, but it was really taking a very high-level view of things. The steering committee is going to come back and working from the findings of the exploratory committee, come up with some more practical suggestions, something closer to a plan of action as we move forward. Now the steering committee is here, and there may be things that they'll want to say or questions you may have that they'll be able to answer, but they are not able to tell you what they're going to recommend, because they haven't decided what they're going to recommend, and you know, I don't think what we want to hear is what each individual wants to recommend, because they'll be making their collective report. So that to not just sound like you know, we don't have anything to tell you, what I thought I could provide is my sense of where things are headed. You know, I'm not a member of the steering committee, but someone that's watching the steering committee's process, somebody that's read the reports from the discussion groups, and in a very kind of broad way about what I see some of the themes that are coming together. Now, this does not, anything I say is not binding on the steering committee. They can look at me and say, what, are you crazy? We don't want to do any of those things. But this is my take on kind of where we are. So my assumption is, and it of course could be proven wrong, that we will see a recommendation that follows that of the exploratory committee, that there will be a recommendation to the provost and to the campus that a new school or college plus an institute be created at the University of Colorado at Boulder that will take up the educational and intellectual opportunities within this field. You know, to me, one of the most important things to note is what an incredibly exciting opportunity this is. We do not create new schools or colleges at this university, or really any university, very often. Arizona State's somewhat of an exception, which seems to create a new school or college on a monthly basis. But universities are incredibly conservative institutions. We move very slowly. We don't reorganize ourselves very often. I'm not sure exactly when the last school or college was created on this campus, but I'm willing to bet it was 50 years or more ago. So this is an incredible opportunity for the faculty, students, and the larger CU community to build something that looks to the future, that will do something exciting, and that will kind of change the academic landscape of the campus. Beyond that, I think that as we listen to you know, I went to as many of the discussion groups as I could, and reading the reports, being at other kinds of meetings, I think there's consensus about a number of things about what we mean by this field of ICJMT. I think in general what we find that what we're talking about is that we're interested in communication expression and the grounds that underlie that communication expression and the implications of that communication expression. Now, there are lots of ways to think about this. There's lots of ways to organize this very complex field, but it's useful to remember that, you know, we got to create something that we're going to communicate or express. We got to communicate or express it, and somebody has to receive it, and that we can look at that that kind of 3-beat process in separate pieces. We can look at the creative process, we can look at the reception process, or we can look at it as a whole. We can try to put the process together. We can look at it at a kind of underlying level of the technologies and the very many technologies that underlie these processes, and those are not just the latest technologies, but all sorts of technologies. We can look at the human interactions that comprise this process, or for that matter, sometimes the machine-to-machine interactions that comprise that process. And we can think about the implications that this process has for culture, for society, and so on. Obviously, this is an area that can be and is approached from a wide variety of practices and disciplines. But I think that what the faculty that have been talking about this are reaching for is not another opportunity to stake out disciplinary lines, but instead to find a shared area of research and teaching, really a shared set of questions and problems that can be answered from different disciplinary perspectives, and that different disciplines intervene into these processes at different points and at different levels, but that collectively they can give us a much richer portrait of this kind of very central feature of our society, our economy, our culture. I think that we listen to people, we see a desire for this new school or college to have a deep commitment to the connection between theory and practice, that it is both important to allow our students to study media communication, mass communication, the technology, and to use it, to have opportunities to work with it, that various literacies will be invaluable to the education of these students, the kind of verbal literacy we expect of all students, the mathematical literacy or computational literacy, visual literacy, digital literacy, that storytelling is something that brings together a lot of these practices, and particularly on the practical side, it doesn't really make any difference whether you're writing a newspaper story or making a documentary film, or writing a game for multiplayers on the internet. You have to know how to tell stories, and that there's an interest in having a focus on collaborative project-centered work is something that will prepare our students well as they move out into the larger world. Now, I'm not suggesting that any or all these things are going to be highlighted in any final report. I'm just saying these are themes that I've heard so that you have some sense, at least from one person's perspective, about what's been going on for the last 8 months and more. Now, I realize that a number of you will be here because you're particularly concerned to hear about what we are doing with journalism and mass communication. It is always important to remember that while this began from a bureaucratic or administrative point with a call by the Chancellor to look at discontinuance of SJMC, this conversation has never just been about journalism and mass communication. It's a much larger conversation. We are not talking about simply recreating a new school of journalism and mass communication. I think it's pretty clear we're also not creating a college of information. We're not creating a school of communication and media studies. We're not really trying to create anything for which there is a precise model already existing on some other campus that we're going to copy. I think we're really looking for something new, something distinctive, something that will put CU on the map in this field. But for those of you that are particularly concerned about journalism, it's important to know that there will be a role for journalism education within this new school or college, at least in my view. Journalism, well, it will be an important practice that can still be taught to our students. Students will still be able to get a journalism education. I think what we'll be seeing is that they'll get an education on a broader model of what constitutes an education, and keeping with the Journalism Plus program in place. They'll be getting this education within a context where they'll have greater opportunities to learn about the technologies that they need as they move forward. And they'll do so alongside the other kinds of practitioners, from documentary filmmakers to bloggers to creative nonfiction writers, that I think that can only, again, enrich their educational experience. A lot of the discussion that one's going to hear around ICJMT is not going to focus on what to do about journalism, because it's describing a larger mission, but that is not to say that journalism doesn't have an important place in it. The same would be true for other disciplinary formations that might be involved with this new school or college. We're not interested in highlighting the distinct disciplines, but again, in this kind of shared set of problems and concerns. But enough from me. What would you all like us to hear as we move forward in this process, or what questions might you have?
I try with Jeff, and I hear, first up, I want to thank you, and I want to thank the committee for this very important project that I think is going to shape a huge number of things on this campus for decades. So I appreciate your sacrifice and the work you have done and the work you will do. I hear clearly that this is not the time to be discussing structure and turf. And yet, as Jeff has characterized themes that are emerging, I'm wondering if you can also help us to understand boundaries and scope by addressing themes that you might have expected to emerge, that the early indications are that these may not be good things to pursue. They may not be worthy investments. So in that sense, do you have a sense of what the school may not be?
Well, I mean, I don't
as a matter of topics, issues, themes that seem less likely than others.
Well, it's not lots of things. I mean, to begin with, and I mean, I think Brian's pointing to an important problem we've had all along, which is trying to figure out what the borders are of this conversation. Because in one sense, one can imagine this absorbing everything. I mean, everything is involved in these kinds of processes in one way or another, and that is obviously not a viable model. I'll take a stab at a couple things, and then maybe if people have other things they want to add. So there's a drive on campus to do something in the area of computational science, and I think there was initially some sense that there was some relationship between the interest in computational science and what this new school or college might be doing. This group was also interested in issues around the impact of computation, large data sets, and so on. But I think it became clear that that is not something that is close to the heart of this and is better handled through other kinds of structures. And there's, in fact, efforts underway led out of the Vice Chancellor for Research Office to kind of move forward in computational science. I think that there, a slightly different kind of thing is I think that there clearly is a interest within all these conversations about the impact of these new technologies on the arts, and in turn how the arts can reflect upon these new technologies. But there's no sense in which we would create, whether we would either move, say, Michael and the College of Music inside this new school, or create a rival place. Instead, trying to imagine where there might be an interdisciplinary or inter-arts home in the new school or college to bring people together that are placed in different locations. I think that and we could make a long list of things that were pretty easy to decide weren't going to be involved and probably never were going to consider to be involved. I mean, we could say, well, why isn't the English department involved? The English department's involved with writing and so on. Well, it's just not going to be. It doesn't belong here. It belongs where it is. The other thing I would say is that because you started talking about the disciplinary. Drawing of disciplinary lines, I think there is a desire to make this a much more porous institution or a porous administrative structure than we might have elsewhere, that the relationship between the faculty in this new school or college and other schools or colleges, we hope, will be very rich. We're having a somewhat larger conversation about some of the barriers that we create between schools and colleges on campus that prevent us from doing certain kinds of things.
What kind of time frame are you talking about moving forward?
So they need to report to the provost, as I say, by March 23rd. The provost decides how to move forward from there, but my sense of what we would, so let's back up a second. So they're going to make a report. The provost will receive the report. The provost will consult with the campus in the ways that he sees fit. He could decide, thank you, we're not doing anything. Everything's just perfect. We're not changing anything. So that would be one scenario. We're done. If we're moving forward, I think that what we're going to need to do is to constitute a faculty to found this new school or college. That would not necessarily commit faculty to moving their tenuring and rostering into a new unit. It would express their desire to be part of the conversation of doing a set of practical tasks that would have to be done at that point. So first of all, we cannot, they will make recommendations about, and they can make them as precise as they want, about curricula that might be delivered from this new school or college. But they can't institute a curriculum. Right? Curriculum is instituted by a faculty, so there has to be a constituted faculty to accept and vet curricular models that would be put forward. And it would also be charged with conducting a search, whether internal or external, for leaders for the new entity. So if we decide, for example, we're going to make a new school or college, we could decide the first thing we need to do is start putting a curriculum together and find a dean. Those could be things we do. Or I might say, there's going to be 4 divisions within this new school or college. What we need to do is work on the curriculum and identify 4 division chairs, and then move forward to find a leader. And that would, in my view, would happen next year. The thing we need to remember about all this is we can come up with fabulous ideas. We can imagine we're all going to come to complete consensus about all those fabulous ideas. But until all this is approved by the Board of Regents, we cannot move forward. And so we have to put ourselves in a position to bring proposals forward to the Board of Regents that we would, and put them forward in such a way and at such a time that we would have success.
So what would be the earliest that a new school would open in your mind?
Well, so it depends what you mean by open. So I would hope that we would have a new school or college created by name by the, what's this going to be, by the fall of 2013. Whether we were actually admitting students into that, or let's put it another way, whether we'd be admitting students into new curricular tracks as opposed to using, or into new degree programs as opposed to using tracks within existing degree programs at that point. I think that's a heavy lift for us to imagine that we're going to, beginning, if we got everybody even beginning to work at the end of this spring, which is unlikely, we're probably going to talk about the next fall, to get things designed and approved, and then, you got to get them advertised and go out and recruit students. So, so if we were going to design some incredibly exciting new degree program, we're probably waiting another year before we're actually going to admit students into it. But there may be ways to fast track some of that by using tracks inside existing degrees, right? So if we create a new degree, we have to go to the Board of Regents for it. If we can reasonably propose that what we're really doing is a track inside an existing degree, that's a campus level decision. So it gives us different kinds of ways forward.
As a member of the JMC faculty, I want to say first that I endorse the new college, and I'm excited about Journalism Plus, and I really support the rationale behind Journalism Plus. How would you respond, though, to some of my colleagues, or speaking for myself, who might say the new college is exciting, but journalism, as you say, is an important practice, and I think it's an important practice for a research university and for culture and democracy, et cetera, et cetera. It's a very important practice. So what would you say to alleviate concerns that journalism in this new college could be lost in a cloud of information?
Well, I just don't, my answer is, I guess I just don't see it happening. I mean, I think that, I guess, in one way, I understand the concerns. Journalism, mass communication was a unified faculty delivering its programs in a school setting where they got to do their own thing and they were only doing their thing. Now, I come from the College of Arts and Sciences. How many departments we have, Keith? in arts and sciences?
39, I believe.
Yeah, 39 departments, and, I don't think the English department is lost because we have a first-rate physics department. So I think part of it is just a concern about moving into a different kind of administrative structure where there's a larger, there's a larger number of players, there's a larger number of degrees, there's a larger number of things going on. But I think what everybody within journalism has to remember is, the physics department doesn't tell the English department how to teach English, and the English department doesn't tell physics how to teach physics. That there will be new interdisciplinary shared curricula created, I imagine, within this new school or college that will bring people together from various areas. But we're not going to go about stopping doing things that we do successfully and that our students want us to do. I mean, journalism is a degree that students want to get. So we are going to, I think, create a more exciting home for the delivery of journalism, and the piece of it that is about journalism is going to be still in the hands of those people that are the specialists. But I understand, I've been saying this for a year and a half and more, and it doesn't seem to be very reassuring. I think it's just really going to take the experience, and I think once there, one's going to find out that it's actually much more exciting to be in that kind of environment than not.
May I add something to that? Yeah. My impressions from all that I've heard over the past several months is there's equal or not, if not greater, anxiety among those who might be interested in being involved in this college or school about the possibility that this will be nothing but old wine in new bottles, that it will be journalism, a new J school with a different name. So that needs to be taken into consideration alongside the concerns and anxieties among the faculty and students of the former School of Journalism and Mass Communication, of which I'm a member, that there are a lot of people who have the opposite concern.
One thing I haven't heard about in terms of themes, going back to themes, and maybe this was part of the process, was business models and entrepreneurship and how that fits in. Obviously, for journalism, that's a big elephant in the room, but really for all forms of media. I guess I'm not clear if that's part of it. It's obviously it's not part of the name. So, can anybody address that?
Again, I'll take a first stab, and then you guys can say something smarter. There has been some involvement from faculty in leads in the conversation, and there's been involvement from people, from David Sladen from Boulder Digital Works, which has obviously some of these concerns. I think, it probably was more centrally involved in the conversations in the advertising design area than in others, though there may have been more discussions in the various journalism conversations that that I didn't hear. I think there is the information management group, which is now relatively small in Leeds, I think has some interest in thinking through things with this group. Again, it's probably, I don't know, is it something that's been keeping you guys up at night, or is this something that we've not?
Well, if I can't, as you pointed out, we haven't made decisions about what we're going to recommend as a group. But I'd like to just share my own thinking on the subject. As some of you know there's going to be a symposium in February that will have speakers from a variety of backgrounds that relate to media, communication, information technology. And one of the people we've invited is one of the gurus of media entrepreneurship, new media entrepreneurship, and in fact, Steve is the person who was the main contact for bringing that person that the JMC has funded for the symposium, and his name is Mark Briggs. I asked Steve and Paul Vokes about possibly bringing someone who could speak to some of those issues, because I think that the symposium that we're organizing for February, and there's going to be another one, shorter one in March, are valuable opportunities to stimulate campus conversation in what remains an open process. And I can see how across all media, not just journalism and news reporting, but documentary filmmaking, digital media arts and design. So many occupations are in flux right now. So many creative occupations are in flux right now because stable legacy, so-called legacy industry models are enduring I don't want to say a collapse, but a significant transformation due to the migration from analog to digital media. And so it is, I agree, at least speaking only for myself, but I think we're going to have more of that conversation, that it is an essential area that ought to be addressed within the new entity. For those of you who don't know, we have a little bit of coursework offered in this area, and one of the people who teaches it is sitting toward the back. Sandra Fish teaches a course on media entrepreneurship. I don't know if I got the name of the course correct. Okay, so that I believe that is an important area that we ought to look at because of the consciousness that was raised about closing down the SJMC because of the transformations happening around it in the business and technology worlds. If we failed to address the question of how do people make sustained livings in this new media environment, and we're only teaching them the skills that, with no clear direction to manage their lives and careers, we wouldn't be doing a full service, I think.
It does remind me that I want to thank Andrew and Chris Brader and others that have been involved, that JMC has made available to this conversation funds to put together a number of academic sessions discussing the various aspects of this. There were 2 in the fall, right, Andrew? And
oh yeah,
and there's one coming up in February. Even the English department contributed yesterday. A narratologist was talking about models for thinking about narrations in everything from experimental fiction to the reporting of climate change scenarios to multiplayer games. That was yesterday afternoon.
I'm Paul Bate. I'm a grad student in the journalism program, and I'm wondering if any of you want to answer what is the most interesting, innovative, imaginative idea that you've come across in your groups, or that you found in another program that you've looked at? What are the ideas that really struck a chord with you?
Anybody have an exciting thing they want to?
It's like choosing among your children. I mean,
Yeah.
there have been many about which we're very excited.
I think that, a kind of broader area rather than picking one is, I think that when we had the discussion last week, it was interesting that a number of groups coming from very different disciplinary perspectives, and some where this word wouldn't be the first word in their mouths. We're talking about laboratories as places in which to do the work. And then there was a conversation, well, what do we mean by laboratories? Did you guys mean you're going to have test tubes and Bunsen burners? Well, no, they didn't mean that. But some of them did mean that there was going to be, you know, lots of kind of machines in a place where students would be able to come and work with them. Some of them meant collaborative work projects. And so I think that, you know, there is, I think one of the things that's most exciting is rather than something specific is a kind of gravitation towards a model of learning that, again, as I said earlier, will involve the theory, but will also give students the opportunity to really get experience in one or more practices that would fall within this domain.